Okay, so welcome again, Elaine, to the Zoom room for another Art of Letting Go live session. So we're going to dive into some reading from the Song of Prayer supplement to A Course in Miracles today. So
you didn't need to put that much in. You only need to put a little bit in.
With
An
you.
inch or two.
Straight into that.
It's up to you, love.
Moment. All right, so there you go, and I'll share my screen. Okay, so this is section 1.3 of the Song of Prayer supplement to A Course in Miracles, which has now been included. The latest versions include the supplements, but they were written subsequent to the first the course being published.
Yeah.
In 1977. So these came, I think they were written 5 to 10 years afterwards.
Right.
And then published sort of as supplements, but they came via the same process of guided sort of dictation, which Helen did the course with. So I think rightly they're part of it. You know, they're just extra addendum supplements that talk about specific issues. This one's about prayer, and then the other one's on psychotherapy. So this one is about praying for others. How do you pray for others correctly? That's the question. So I'll read. Shall I read the original? You read the alternative.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorted there.
Section 1.3, praying for others. Here we go. So we said that prayer is always for yourself, and this is so.
Oh, I see. There's a little. Oh, I see. Yes. Yeah. Yeshua has said that prayer is always for myself, and this is true.
Why then should you pray for others at all?
Why then should I pray for others at all?
And if you should, how should you do it?
And if I should, how should I do it?
Praying for others, if rightly understood, becomes a means for lifting your projections of guilt from your brother and enabling you to recognize it is not he who is hurting you.
Praying for others, if rightly understood, becomes a means for lifting my projections of guilt from my companions and enabling me to recognize that it is not them who are hurting me.
The poisonous thought that he is your enemy, your evil counterpart, your nemesis, must be relinquished before you can be saved from guilt.
I must let go of the poisonous thought that they are my enemy, my evil counterpart and nemesis, before I can be freed from guilt.
For this, the means is prayer of rising power and with ascending goals until it reaches even up to God.
The means for this is prayer of rising power and with ascending goals until I experience pure formless awareness of perfect love itself. And from the top, Yeshua has said that prayer is always for myself, and this is true. Why then should I pray for others at all? And if I should, how should I do it? Praying for others, if rightly understood, becomes a means for lifting my projections of guilt from my companions and enabling me to recognize that it is not them who are hurting me. I must let go of the poisonous thought that they are my enemy, my evil counterpart and nemesis, before I can be freed from guilt. The means for this prayer of rising power and with ascending goals until I experience pure formless awareness of perfect love itself. So it's just saying that Yeshua is talking about prayer and that we are always doing it for ourselves. And he's making it quite clear that's true. But then how should we pray for others, if at all? And if we should, how? So if we're praying for others, then it'll lift our projections of guilt from our companions, so enabling us to recognize that it is not them who are hurting us. So we must let go of these poisonous thoughts, that these are our enemy and our evil counterparts, before we can be free of guilt. So the means to prayer is rising power and ascending goals until we experience this pure formless awareness of perfect love.
Yeah, so very clearly he's saying here that prayer is not about, oh, I pray, some in Christian circles they have prayer groups, and often they're like, well, someone's sick, so we'll pray for them, or someone is struggling with money issues, so we'll pray for them. That's a lower form of prayer, right? Those are prayers to meet specific needs and perceived lack and scarcity and sickness. But the true prayer is to say, I want to stop projecting my guilt onto my brother and judging them and condemning them. So the true prayer, as he says in the text, is for forgiveness or letting go. You ask for help with letting go and to perceive your brother correctly. And so you must let go of the poisonous thought that they are your enemy, your evil counterpart, your nemesis. And these kinds of thoughts do come up if someone is being especially difficult and obstructive, sometimes, outright attacking. Last year I had a situation where I was being attacked verbally, well, on email primarily. They're really not nice things. So very easy then to judge that person as your enemy. Ego, lends itself to that, says, okay, well, this is your, evil counterpart, your nemesis, your enemy, and they must be treated as such, which of course just perpetuates separation, because you must be separate from them, they must be separate from you. You've got to watch your back, you've got to defend against them. Maybe you have thoughts of attacking them, and all of that just creates perpetuates the identity of a separate self. So you must let this go before you can be freed from guilt, because as long as you believe in a separate self, you also believe in the guilt that underlies it. The idea of separation is underlain by guilt. So let's have a look here at that diagram where it's really up, because I was doing it with John. So the guilt and the sin that come from seemingly separating from your source and believing that you're an individual self are perpetuated if you perceive an enemy. Okay, well, now there's an enemy outside of myself. And what I do then is I project that guilt onto them. And I say, I'm not the guilty one. God's not going to get me. God's going to get you and going to punish you. So you are to blame, my brother. And this is just a projection of guilt onto them, which perpetuates the idea of guilt and sin, which perpetuates the illusion that you have an individual self, that you have separated from God or source, and you're guilty for that. So this is why, condemning, judging your enemies is not a good idea, because it just means that you perpetuate the illusion of a separate self, and which demands that creates guilt and sin, and that demands punishment. And then you've got fear, and you've got attack thoughts, and that's the insanity of the ego. Whereas if you just realize, actually, all I'm doing by blaming my brother is projecting my guilt onto him or her, and really what I need to do is let go of that guilt and stop that projection, then that's the true prayer, which is just forgiveness. So 6 of one and half a dozen of another. He says prayer, but really what he means when he says this kind of prayer is just forgiveness. And he makes that connection explicit in the text. He says, prayer, the true prayer is only for forgiveness. Maybe I can actually find that section for you. Right, there's Kim. That's nice.
Okay.
Let's welcome Kim. I haven't seen her for a while. Hey, Kim.
Hi, Jono.
How are you? It's a nice surprise. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, Kim.
Hi there.
Hi.
Yeah, so anything to share? Briefly, or we're busy with some text from the Song of Prayer, if you want to just dive in.
Okay. I've just yeah, I did a 3-day water fast last week.
Okay. How'd that go?
I had some challenges, but I'd say I got through it on the whole okay. Yeah, so I'm just trying to just stick with being more healthy, and I'm trying to lose some weight. That's taken a long time.
Yeah.
Okay, so just in and eating cleanly, but I am feeling better. But sometimes I have these, I think my body's still adjusting. Sometimes I just have times where I feel low energy, like not exhausted, like I want to sleep, just more like a fatigue energy, like a fatigue still.
Yeah.
I mean, like maybe a little bit during that water fast, but before and after, when I was really got more into the keto and intermittent fasting, but I've been intermittent fasting now for at least 7 weeks, but doing proper, so it's taking time, but okay, I think I do feel kind of cleaner in my body.
Yeah, good.
And I think, other than that, I think things have been generally calm most of the time, which is good. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So you
Just interesting start of the year, I think more globally actually, but
yeah, it's all illusion. Just focus on your own process, which sounds like you're doing. So that's good. Well done.
yeah. There's also some learnings from, I mean, with the water fast was through a lady who name's Dr. Minnie Peltz. She's American based, actually LA based. So so I mean, she's got a lot of YouTube videos online. been interviewed a lot, and then like she does this January like with a group water fast, so there was a lot of good preparation of that, and just also how, you know, but spiritually as well, and how to just like, if you're feeling hungry, you're struggling, it's that you know, telling yourself you've got this, and I guess you can apply some spiritual parts to it as well, and and you know, she said maybe by the end of day 2 you might just like set your intention before, and what is it you know, what is it that you want to know, because that could come to you after a couple of days. Anyway, during this they started the Monday night. She said she couldn't join because she had to clear her home, so she's lost her home. She lives in the Palisades.
Okay.
Yeah, and then she came on, and she was yeah, it was, she had done a fast herself the week before. Something told her to do it the week before, and she just kind of aligned her learning with that and fasting in general, and her experience of how she had to evacuate was quite interesting. So she had to she said when she was moving out the suburb, and then she had to turn onto, she could either turn right onto Sunset Drive, and that was less busy, but it was actually going, but she could tell from the, you know, she's in this mode of flight and she was being directed by her sister on the phone, who knows the area, and she said she went into the difficulties. So she was just comparing the experience of when you're doing the fast, just going to the discomfort, going to the difficulty, because it's actually going to lead you to the better outcome. You know, so if she went the other direction, which looked like a, you know, easier in terms of the traffic and the congestion and all that, she would have actually gone into the direction of the fire, but people were abandoning their cars, and there was like fronds of the trees flying, you know what I mean? It would have been the worst outcome for her, actually. So she was just kept on, you know, she was very, it's quite interesting around just, you know, analysis and just going into that discomfort, she was saying, because, so yeah, it was quite a, well, I guess
that's when you learn.
for her, and having to like kind of, that her experience, not just, I guess, many years of doing this, teaching us and doing it herself, and what, you know, like just continue on that journey, like don't go into that discomfort. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So when you go into the discomfort, that's when there's a letting go. Okay, so I've got to let go of my aversion to the discomfort, and that's a spiritual practice. So fasting, I remember doing hot yoga years back, and I would go into, I mean, so at that point in time, I was training pretty hard. So I'd have like 4 or 5 hours of training, maybe more. And my last sort of part of the training was to go do an hour and a half Bikram yoga class. So I'd already done like 4 or 5 hours, right? So I'm like, and I get into those classes, and it would be like, okay, you just actually got to let go, because you're going so far into the discomfort, right? I mean, sometimes it was 47 degrees. I mean, in the beginning stages of it, they just let the temperature go skyrocketing. Remember one time because they had a thermometer, it was like 48 degrees. That was the hottest. And then, you know, they just went, okay, we got to calm it down a bit. And they just push. You know, you remember Sally? I don't know if you ever did a class with her. You know, like, right, you know, lock your knee. And so it was, but what it did for me was that I actually just learned to let go. It was like, instead of, okay, I've got to push and make this happen and get through this, there was a bit of that to start with, but it got so intense. Like I was so hot and so uncomfortable and so tired that I just let go, which is the point. It was like, okay, I'm just got to do it and just kind of go with the process and stop resisting the feelings. The feelings are just so there was a detachment from the physical experience of, okay, like I'm really, really hot, sometimes like to the point of like, I'm overheating here, and really, really fatigued, like because I've already done 4 or 5 hours of quite hard training. And now, I'm just asking to hold for a minute in some of these postures. It's just, but I let go. And boy, that was the point. And something happened in that first, say, 18 months of doing it that was like very profound. I just learned, instead of pushing and stressing and straining to do it, it was okay, I just show up and I do it. And I let go of the psychological resistance to the discomfort. And that's very spiritual. That helps you. That's part of the letting go process. So I think if you can go into it willingly, and then you give yourself the opportunity to let go of that discomfort and that aversion, that's like choosing to let go and accelerating your lessons. You're making your process quicker. Most people resist and they avoid. I don't want discomfort, but it comes anyway at some point, and then they find it more difficult to deal with. Whereas, people okay, I've consciously gone into the discomfort in whatever way that is. It could be a water fast, it could be doing, hectic Bikram yoga, or any other, spiritual practice, breath holding. I did a lot of breath holding, for instance, which, is some serious physical discomfort when you hold your breath for long periods of time. But there's something that does that is very profound for your mind. So I can only, say, yeah, you're on the right track. Just keep going and go into it. Just go, okay, I'm essentially what you're doing is you're giving yourself a difficult experience, and then you've got to rise above it. You've got to let go of it. Most people avoid difficult experiences, but then when they come, they're not ready for them, and they're like, oh, I really don't know how to deal with this. People who give themselves difficult experiences consciously, willingly, are much more robust and resilient to the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, as Shakespeare puts it. Which makes sense. It's like you've trained yourself, to cope with difficulty. When it's not difficult, you've made it difficult for yourself so that you get experience of that. And then, when life inevitably does get difficult, you're okay, well, kind of, I know how to handle this. It's why in military training, the best sergeant majors are the ones who are the hardest. They're really tough on their troops in training because they're like, well, when it gets into combat, it could be as bad or worse, and I've got to train you for that. Otherwise, I'm not doing you any favors. You're going to go into combat, and I've kind of taken it easy on you, and you're not going to be prepared for the chaos and the physical strain, and bombs going off, and you might be injured, and emotional stress. You're not going to be prepared for it because I haven't trained you properly for that. So that's why they do tough combat training, so that the guys get ready. They're ready for the test when it comes. So spiritual practice is kind of the same. Okay, you're training yourself to cope and be resilient, which is a good thing. So yeah, whether it's water fast or something else, just stick to it. Any one of these practices can be really helpful and part of the process of awakening. Okay, so anything else to share? Shall we jump back into text then? We're on number 1.
Which interrupted the flow.
Yeah, no, it's okay. We'll carry on. So I'm just going to share my screen because I've got I just brought up. This is we're doing the Song of Prayer, section 1.3. This is on how to pray for others. So I just thought it'd be useful to actually look at what the text says briefly about it. So if you can read that, Kim. This is from early in the text, chapter 3, section 5, paragraph 6, where he talks about prayer, the relationship between prayer and forgiveness. So just that one paragraph, if you can read that.
Prayer is a way of asking for something. It's the medium of miracles. The only meaningful prayer is for forgiveness, because those who have been forgiven have everything. Once forgiveness has been accepted, prayer in the usual sense becomes absolutely meaningless. This is nothing more than a request that you may be able to recognize what you already have. Electing perception instead of knowledge, you place yourself in a position where you could resemble your Father, only being miraculously. You have lost the knowledge that you yourself are a miracle of God. Creation is your source and your only real function.
Yeah, so what's he saying there in summary?
It's forgiving or letting go, which is forgiveness. Because you'll recognize with the letting go, you'll realize what you already have is basically being one with God and creation. So it's
So the highest form of prayer is saying, I just want to let go. I want to let go of all the blocks to the awareness of love's presence and be reunited with my source. So, help me, Holy Spirit, in doing that. Beyond that, the ultimate form of prayer is the merging of the Father with the Son. So when you are back in pure formless awareness of perfect love, in that mystic experience that so many masters and mystics have reported, then prayer, there's no need for prayer anymore. So that's not prayer anymore. That's the top of the ladder. You've got back here. If you have a look at this, where are we? Sorry, we want to go here into Holy Trinity. So prayer sits here. Prayer is part of forgiveness, prayer, healing. It's a way of connecting your separated self, letting go of that separated self, and restoring your mind to the true self or the Christ. And from there, it's a short step back to God in pure formless awareness of love.
So what's the difference between revelation and awakening?
So revelation talks about a state. Revelation would really belong here. So if you have a revelation, you have a temporary glimpse of this state, pure formless awareness of perfect love. And in revelation, there's no process anymore. There's nothing to learn. It's just a pure experience of this awareness, pure formless awareness of perfect love. So it belongs here in level 1. Awakening is a process of letting go of all the blocks. So awakening, or at-one-ment, or forgiveness, or letting go, or healing, or prayer, whatever language you want to use, it's part of a process of preparing yourself for this pure formless awareness of perfect love, for revelation. Ultimately, revelation becomes permanent when there are no more blocks to awareness of love's presence. You simply merge back into the source. You're one with pure formless awareness of perfect love, and the dream is over. So that's where all of these things lead you, whether you call it forgiveness or letting go or prayer or healing or awakening. It's the same thing. It's operating here at this level between the separate self living in a dream world that believes that it is a separate self and that the dream world is real. And it's a process of awakening the mind to the truth that it is really just one self, and that one self is derived from pure formless awareness of perfect love or God. And so none of this is really real. And that process is, these terms are process terms. They are part of a process, they're
So
part of learning.
therefore, so really, you know, Kim, myself, and you are well, you may be further up the ladder, but where Kim and I are in the awakening stage, is that right? We're aware
Yeah,
that
well,
we're in this
we're all doing
3D
this.
world.
If we were here, then we probably wouldn't, this course is not for people who are here.
No, but
The people who are already here are, advanced mystics. They would be, the teachers of teachers, and there's not very many of them, and they're beyond learning. So that's kind of the level of a Yeshua, Buddha. Really, for the majority, 99.99% of us, and that includes me, it's a process of gradually awakening through a process of consciously letting go of the blocks to awareness of love's presence, which keep coming up in your experience of this life and the world.
yeah,
And your only true prayer is for that process of letting go of forgiveness to happen quickly and to be guided in that, and for help with that. And that then guides you back to the true self, to identifying with the true self or the Christ, which is then in a very high state of mind, ready for God to take the final step and restore you back to this pure formless awareness of perfect love. He doesn't say much about this step. He just says God takes the final step. But he says a lot. The majority of the course, 99% of the course, is about this process of awakening from
dropping
dreams.
into the heart, when the people just say, instead of dropping into your mind, drop into your heart. Is that the pure formless awareness when you're in the heart? Or is it
Yeah, so
a little bit?
again, these are terms. I mean, heart is typically about feeling, it's about emotion. So it's going beyond just the mind. But that can be a process of transformation. So you drop into the heart and you start feeling joy or love, peace. You're in this process of correcting your mind and correcting your perception. That changes your perception. You become more aware of the true self. And so if it's about transformation, drop into the heart implies you need to do something, doesn't it?
Mm.
Anything where you have to do something is at this level.
Yeah.
Because this level is beyond doing. This level, statements like non-dual statements like I need do nothing. You need do nothing apply to this level. At this level, yeah, you need do nothing because you're already healed, you're already fully aware of who you are and your oneness with God, your source reality. So there's nothing to do, nowhere to go, nothing to do. You simply hang out in this awareness. But that's a very advanced state. And it's beyond all practice. It's beyond prayer, it's beyond forgiveness, it's beyond learning, it's beyond healing. But to get there, you almost certainly will have had to do all of that. No one just gets there like that. Everyone has a process to do that, some shorter, some longer. For most of us, it's an ongoing, lifelong process of learning and correcting our perceptions and identifying more and more with our true self and preparing ourselves for the coming of this awareness into our mind. So prayer sits here. Kind of running out of space there. Maybe I could do it on the other side. Maybe that's an idea. I'll use the other side. So a prayer would sit here as well. And really, once you start understanding the course, you start seeing that everything is really everything here is really the same. It's the same process, whether you call it
Just different
atonement
words,
or
yeah.
letting
So,
go, or you call it prayer, or you call it healing, or the second coming, or the last judgment. All these terms are about this process
yeah. So
of letting go of your identification with the ego and all of its perceptions of the world. So you're letting go of your separate self and awakening to the truth that you are just one self, and that love and peace and joy are the inheritance of the self. And that's not very far removed from pure formless awareness of perfect love. If you're staying in a very high state of love and peace and joy, then pure formless awareness of perfect love is there. It's in the love and in the peace and in the joy, which we see if we go into map of consciousness, David Hawkins' take on this. You see love, joy, peace, and then those are precursors to the ultimate enlightenment state, which is ineffable pure consciousness. We call that pure formless awareness of perfect love. But love and peace and joy precede that in this. So you would have had to start awakening to these and having these experiences to then finally merge into this state of ineffable pure consciousness or awareness, where you and God are one. Right? God views that God is the self. You are one with God. There's no separation. And you just hang out in that awareness. So prayer sits at this level here, and so it's restorative, it's reparative, like all the other ideas. It's part of a process of awakening, which is needed until it's not needed. You only need to pray until you're back in God, your formless awareness of perfect love, when all need for prayer ceases, because you're already there. You don't need to pray for something that you already have. So it's like forgiveness. It's an illusion, but it's the illusion that corrects the other illusions and awakens you to the truth.
just so many expressions, isn't it? There's samadhi, and yeah, like I say, dropping into the hearts. So many different expressions.
There's many phrases, many ways of expressing this. But if you understand this, the system, then you can you know where they slot in. Drop into the heart. Well, if it has any action that you've got to do anything about it, then it's here, right? Healing, that's a process. It's describing the second coming. It's coming. It's a process. At one-ment, yeah, you could say at one-ment happens. At one-ment is also the final result. When you attain at one-ment, then you're in pure formless awareness of perfect love. But the way he uses it primarily in the course is it's part of this at one-ment or awakening process. Awakening is another term. Resurrection, rebirth, satori. So samadhi, when you enter samadhi, it's another name for this. At the top here. If you're just in that awareness, there's no longer anything to do. You're just chilling out in pure formless awareness of perfect love, and you can stay there for hours, sometimes days, or even weeks. Some of these mystics just enter into this absolute bliss, and there's no sense of time. That is pure formless awareness of perfect love. They've completely transcended all of this. They don't need to forgive anymore, because they're in the awareness, in their true awareness, and so there's nothing to do there. Okay, so I hope that clarifies it. Let's go back to the prayer. Song of Prayer 1.3. So maybe just for Kim's benefit, Kim, if you just read the alternative. So we've only done one paragraph, so just catch up with it.
So it has said that prayer is always for myself, and this is true. Why then should I pray for others at all? And if I should, how should I do it? Praying for others, if rightly understood, becomes a means for lifting my projections of guilt from my companions and enabling me to recognize that it is not them who are hurting me. I must let go of the poisonous thought that they are my enemy, my evil counterpart, and nemesis, before I can be freed from guilt. The means for this is prayer of rising power and with ascending goals until I experience pure formless awareness of perfect love itself.
Okay, so thoughts on that?
So if prayer is involving others, it's really about correcting my projections or perceptions of others.
Yeah, it's about letting go of my own guilt. So what we do is we project our guilt onto others, which is shown quite clearly on this diagram here. So we project our guilt for the apparent sin of separating from God onto others, and then we accuse, we blame, and attack them. So the true prayer is saying, well, I don't want to do that anymore. Help me with not projecting my guilt onto others, so that I'm not blaming them. Because if I do that, I'm just perpetuating my guilt. I'm perpetuating the individual self, and that's not helping me at all. So again, as we saw in the text, the true prayer is for forgiveness. This is about lifting the projections, letting go of the projections. And in doing that, you must also let go of the guilt and the idea of sin. And if you take away guilt and sin, then your individual identity is nowhere. Because if you never separated, you're not guilty. So then the idea of separation starts to deconstruct without the guilt and the sin that underpins it. You see that? And then you start going into pure formless awareness of perfect love, which is beyond, the idea of separation completely. Okay, so just wanted to do a summary of that. Let's go to the second paragraph. Elaine, if you can read. So yeah, I'll tell you what, both of you read it because there's two of you. So Kim, you read the original, and Elaine read the alternative, just sentence by sentence.
The earlier forms of prayer at the bottom of the ladder will not be free from envy and malice.
My earlier forms of prayer at the bottom of the ladder of prayer will not be free from envy and malice.
They call for vengeance, not for love.
They call for vengeance rather than love.
Or do they come from one who understands that they are calls for death, made out of fear by those who cherish guilt?
Nor do they come from someone who understands that they are calls for death, made out of fear by someone who cherishes guilt.
They call upon a vengeful God, and it is he who seems to answer them.
They call upon a vengeful God, and it is that seems to answer them.
Hell cannot be asked for another, and then escaped by him who asks for it.
I cannot ask for victimhood and suffering for another, and then escape these states myself.
Only those who are in hell can ask for hell.
Only my separate self, which exists in a state of victimhood and suffering, can possibly ask for victimhood and suffering.
Those who have been forgiven and who accepted their forgiveness would never make a prayer like that.
When I have fully let go and accepted my release, I will never pray like this. On the top, my earlier forms of prayer at the bottom of the ladder of prayer will not be free from envy and malice. They call for vengeance rather than love, nor do they come from someone who understands that they are calls for death, made out of fear by someone who cherishes guilt. They call upon a vengeful God, and 'tis this that they seem to answer them. I cannot ask for victimhood and suffering for another, and then escape these states myself. Only my separate self, which exists in a state of victimhood and suffering, can possibly ask for victimhood and suffering. When I have fully let go and accepted my release, I will never pray like this.
Okay, so
Mm,
what's he saying there in summary?
I was just talking about the earlier forms of prayer were at the bottom of the ladder of prayer, which was not free from envy and malice.
In the previous section, if you read it, was about the ladder of prayer. So he talked about the different kinds of prayer. So this is a continuation of that.
Mm.
So I suggest you read that if you haven't read that section 2, which I posted yesterday to the group. Oh, sorry, carry on.
Yeah. No, I haven't read that, so that might have helped.
Yeah, because this is section 3 of the Song of Prayer. So he's built
Okay.
up.
Yeah, so I'll have a little look. Yeah. Yeah.
And talks about the different kinds of prayer. But essentially, the lower forms of prayer are requests for specific things.
Yeah.
Oh, I pray for.
And this is not.
I pray for something specific. Maybe it's money. Maybe it's healing, physical healing. But really, that calls for death because what you're asking for is a magic solution to your problems
Yeah.
rather than truth. Made out by fear about someone who cherishes guilt and call upon a vengeful God as this that seems to answer them. And if you ask for hell for anyone else, then you can't escape that yourself.
Mm.
So you kind of the evil prayer would be, I pray that my enemies are punished, for instance. And Christians do pray that way. Some very misguided people do pray. Well, let them be punished, let them get their just deserts. That's not a true prayer at all. That's just judgment and condemnation.
Mm. Mm.
So he's pointing that out. And, well, you're really just asking for hell yourself, which is victimhood and suffering. And when you've fully let go and accepted your release, you'll never pray like this again. You'll realize that it's meaningless to do that. It's self-destructive and pointless and meaningless to pray in this way. Okay. So happy to go on to number 3.
Yeah, no, that was clear. Yeah, thank you.
All right, so switch it around. Elaine, you read the original. Kim, you read the alternative. Sentence by sentence.
At these levels, then the learning goal must be to recognize the prayer will bring an answer only in the form in which the prayer was made.
Therefore, at these levels, my learning goal must be to recognize that prayer will bring an answer only in the form in which I pray.
This is enough.
This is enough.
From here, it will be an easy step to the next levels.
From here, it will be an easy step to the next levels.
The next descent begins with this.
My next ascent begins with this.
What I have asked for my brother is not what I would have.
I do not really want what I have asked for my companions.
Thus have I made of him my enemy.
And so I have made them my enemy.
It is apparent that this step cannot be reached by anyone who sees no value or advantage to himself in setting others free.
Can you scroll down?
Sure.
It is apparent that this step cannot be reached by me if I perceive no value or advantage to myself in setting others free.
This may be long delayed because it may seem to be dangerous instead of merciful.
This may be long delayed because it may seem to be dangerous instead of kind.
To the guilty, there seems indeed to be a real advantage in having enemies, and this imagined gain must go if enemies are to be set free.
There seems to be a real advantage in having enemies to the guilty, and I must let go of this imagined gain if I am to set myself and my enemies free. Tough.
Yeah, from the top.
Therefore, at these levels, my learning goal must be to recognize that prayer will bring an answer only in the form in which I pray. This is enough. From here, it will be easy step to the next levels. Our next step up begins with this. I do not really want what I have asked for my companions, and so I have made them my enemy. It is apparent that this step cannot be reached by me if I perceive no value or advantage to myself in setting others free. This may be long delayed because it may seem to be dangerous instead of kind. There seems to be a real advantage in having enemies to the guilty, and I must let go of this imagined gain if I am to set myself and my enemies free.
Yeah. So what's he saying in summary of that paragraph? What's the key message of that?
So if I pray for something, if I'm making an ask for something to happen to my enemies, which is something that I wouldn't want myself, I'm not going to move forward to the next step. I need to realize that there's no value in praying for something like that for my enemies, which is, hurt or projecting the guilt. So I might perceive it as a more dangerous option not to wish that, thinking that if I'm wishing that, I'm protecting myself. But actually, I need to let go of this imagined gain that I have in this illusion, and then I'll set myself free as well as my enemies or my companions.
So the ego needs enemies to perpetuate itself. It's why there's so much conflict in this world on an interpersonal level, on a societal level, tribes, countries, nations. We go to war with each other because that perpetuates the illusion of a separate self. If I'm fighting someone else and I have an enemy, then that strengthens the separate self. And any leader will tell you that the way to unite a country is create a common enemy. So now we've got a common enemy that unites everyone internally. And now you have to fight the enemy. That's happened many times in history, and all the internal squabbling is forgotten until, of course, then the common enemy's gone, and then the conflict becomes internal again. Why? Because the ego has to have conflict. It has to have enemies in order to perpetuate itself. So that's why the world has always been full of conflict, why there's always been war, and we'll never eliminate it because it's the ego's world. And it's come here to perpetuate itself through the conflicts of this world. So the idea that we're going to have a conflict-free world and heaven on earth is just it's never going to happen. And this is what Yeshua's saying to us. He's saying, look, don't try and fix this place. It's just a projection of guilt, and it's an illusion. Just leave it behind, and go back home to heaven where none of this exists. And there is no need for prayer anymore. So you must see that by letting go of your own guilt and not projecting it onto your companions, that you are freeing yourself. It's that awareness, which would seem to be logical, but very few people have it. It just doesn't seem to be common understanding or knowledge that if I'm projecting guilt onto someone else and attacking them, I'm really attacking myself and I'm condemning myself to hell, victimhood and suffering when I do this. Because the ego tells another story and says, no, 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 this is good because now you're getting rid of your guilt and they're the guilty ones and they're the ones who are going to suffer and die and you're off the hook. And it may look like that way initially, but that's actually not the case. You just perpetuated your guilt, and guilt demands punishment, so then you will suffer. So remember, all attack is self-attack. And that would seem to be logical. And from this logical thought system of the Holy Spirit, it seems to be logical, but very few people understand that, which is why there's so much attack in the world. The ego, remember, is always trying to just project its guilt. So in order to offload this guilt and sin, it has to project it onto someone else and say, well, you're the evil, guilty, sinful one, and God's going to get you. God's going to punish you, not me. And that's why we've invented a world where there's other people, and these other people do various things that seem to warrant their guilt. And so then, we justify it in accusing and blaming and attacking because of what they've done. And, all of that is a setup. Okay, is that clear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so let's go to number 4 then. Guilt must be given up and not concealed. So just switch it again. Kim, if you read the original and Elaine the alternative.
Guilt must be given up and not concealed.
So I must give up my guilt rather than conceal it.
Nor can this be done without some pain and a glimpse of the merciful nature of the step may for some time be followed by a deep retreat into fear.
Nor can I do this without some pain, and a glimpse of the loving nature of this step may for some time be followed by my deep retreat into fear.
For fear's defenses are fearful in themselves, and when they are recognized, they bring their fear with them.
For fear's defenses are fearful in themselves, and when I recognize them, I experience that fear.
What advantage has an illusion of escape ever brought a prisoner?
Yet what advantage has an illusion of escape ever brought a prisoner?
His real escape from guilt can lie only in the recognition that the guilt has gone.
My real escape from guilt can lie only in my recognition that my guilt has gone.
And how can this be recognized as long as he hides it in another and does not see it as his own?
And how can I recognize this as long as I hide my guilt in another and do not see it as my own?
Fear of escape makes it difficult for me to welcome freedom, and to make my enemy a jailer seems to me to be safety.
Fear of escape makes it difficult for me to welcome freedom, and to make my enemy a jailer seems to me to be safety.
How then can he be released without an insane fear for yourself?
How then can I release my enemy without an insane fear of my own destruction?
You have made of him your salvation and your escape from guilt.
I have made of my enemy my freedom and escape from guilt.
Your investment in this escape is heavy, and your fear of letting it go is strong.
My investment in this escape is heavy, and my fear of letting go is strong. And from the top, so I must give up my guilt rather than conceal it. Nor can I do this without some pain, and a glimpse of the loving nature of this step may for some time be followed by my deep retreat into fear. For fear's defenses are fearful in themselves, and when I recognize them, I experience their fear. Yet what advantage has an illusion of escape ever brought a prisoner? My real escape from guilt can lie only in my recognition that my guilt has gone. And how can I recognize this as long as I hide my guilt in another and do not see it as my own? Fear of escape makes it difficult for me to welcome freedom, and to make my enemy a jailer seems to me to be safety. How then can I release my enemy without an insane fear of my own destruction? I have made of my enemy my freedom and escape from guilt. My investment in this escape is heavy, and my fear of letting go is strong.
Okay, so what's he saying there?
Well, we need to let go of the guilt rather than hide it and conceal it. But we can't do this without pain. And there will be glimpses of a loving nature, but it'll be followed by a deep retreat into fear. So these fear defenses are fearful in themselves, and I recognize them and I experience their fear. But there is an advantage, as it's an illusion of escape brought a prisoner. So our real escape from guilt can only lie in our recognition that our guilt has gone. So it's like a radical, so, well, at the end of the day, we need to, because otherwise it's just going to be our destruction as well. So we're caught in the middle, aren't we? We want to escape, but the enemy won't allow it. So it's a bit of a strong one. If the letting go will be strong, it'll feel very strong and heavy to do this, because we're still invested in the separate self.
So, the problem we face is that if we really let go and we forgive our enemy truly, then that destroys our separate self. Because who would I be if I don't have any guilt or sin, see? So the individual self is then deconstructed. So we need an enemy in order to exist as a separate self, which is why we create enemies. And conflict is so much a part of human life. And without that, who would you be? You wouldn't be an individual self anymore. And so it seems like forgiving your enemy is now the destruction of your separate self. And so most people go, well, I'll just carry on projecting my guilt onto my enemy rather than undoing my separate self, even though my separate self is the cause of all of it, the enemy and the attack thoughts and, the entire mess that is the ego. But the ego doesn't let us see that. So it says, no, you need to keep your enemy in place, because that makes you real. That gives you an identity, and you cherish that identity, even though it has such a high cost over your true identity, which is the true self that is one with pure formless awareness of perfect love. So you see the bind we've got ourselves into. We want to let go, but then the ego says, well, if you let go, then you're done for, right? I'm done for. There's no more separate self then. So to forgive your enemy radically means that you don't exist anymore. But do you want to exist with a whole bunch of enemies and conflict and pain and suffering and sickness and death, or are you willing to just let it all go? That's really the question. All right, so happy to go on to number 5.
Yeah. Stand still.
And still an instant. So
You flip it
yeah,
round.
you read the original.
Stand still an instant now and think what you have done.
I should pause for a moment now and think what I have done.
Do not forget that it is you who did it and who can therefore let it go.
I will not forget that it is I who did it and who can therefore let it go.
Hold out your hand.
So I hold out my hand.
This enemy has come to bless you.
This enemy has come to bless me.
Take his blessing and feel how your heart is lifted and your fear released.
I accept their blessing and feel how my heart is lifted and my fear released.
Do not hold on to it, nor onto him.
I will not hold on to it, nor onto my perception of them as an enemy.
He is a son of God along with you.
They are an extension of perfect love along with me.
He is no jailer, but a messenger of Christ.
They are no jailer, but messengers of my true self.
Be this to him, that you may see him thus.
I choose to be this to them, so that I may perceive them in this way. On the top, I should pause for a moment now and think what I have done. I will not forget that it is I who did it and who can therefore let it go. So I hold out my hand. This enemy has come to bless me. I accept their blessing and feel how my heart is lifted and my fear released. I will not hold on to it, nor onto my perception of them as an enemy. They are an extension of perfect love along with me. They are no jailer, but messengers of my true self. I choose to be this to them so that I may perceive them in this way.
What's he saying there? In summary.
So I need to pause and reflect and realize it's my doing, and I can also choose to let it go, or let go the guilt. So instead of perceiving my companion as the enemy, I'd rather change the perception of it and realize that this is actually a blessing, because I can accept the blessing of letting this go and not hold on to it, or not hold on to the perception that they're my enemy, but they're actually my, they're providing a blessing, and then I can let this go and therefore let go the guilt. And with this realization, I'm one with my companion. So it's changing the perception of the enemy, who's actually not my enemy, but they're coming to bring a gift of a realization that changing a perception I can let go of the guilt. And my
Yeah, so they're helping you to
My
forgive
realization
yourself,
is
to let
that's
go of
when
your own separate self. That's what they offer you.
Mm.
And especially if they, they're really apparently attacking you and really horrible and awful. And that's just your own projection. That's projection of your own insane mind coming to punish you for your apparent sin and guilt. So when you let that go and you don't judge them, you undo that in your own mind. So they're giving you the gift of becoming aware of what's in your own mind and then helping you to let it go. And that's the value of the projection. See, how would you do that? How would you know that the guilt is there if you didn't have the enemy to bring it up in you? So the projection is needed to make you aware of what it is you need to let go of and then help you to let it go. And that's why they're bringing you a gift and a blessing. It's very counterintuitive to the ego and requires, totally different way of thinking and perceiving, which is why we read this and we train our minds to say, okay, actually, if I've got an enemy and the enemy's really being apparent enemy and the enemy's really being awful and nasty, and that's good. That's bringing up my ego, and that's giving me an opportunity to let it go and free myself from the guilt and the sin and the hell of it, the victimhood and the suffering of it. And so my enemy gives me that opportunity if I perceive them correctly. So I should thank them, not want to judge and condemn them and attack them. So they point the way to my true self. If I perceive them correctly, my forgiveness of them will connect me with my true self. So this is why, Yeshua said things like turn the other cheek. If your enemy hits you on one cheek, turn the other cheek. Why? Because when you let go of your enmity towards your enemy, then you are healing your mind. You're letting go of your own guilt. And you're freeing your mind from needing to be in this world at all, with other people who apparently now see you as an enemy. But the ego can't understand this, so you have to go beyond the ego's thought system to understand this. Okay, so any other thoughts on that? Questions, comments? Happy to go on to number 6, which I believe is the last one. And we've got a summary to do. So, yeah, Kim, if you read the original, I'll name the alternative kindly.
It is not easy to realize that prayers for things, for status, for human love, or external gifts of any kind are always made to set up jailers and to hide from guilt.
It is not easy for me to realize that prayers for things, status, human love, and external, in quote marks, gifts of any kind are always made to set up jailers and to hide from guilt.
These things are used for goals that substitute for God and therefore distort the purpose of prayer.
These things are used for goals that substitute for pure formless awareness of perfect love and therefore distort the purpose of prayer.
The desire for them is the prayer.
The desire for them is the prayer.
One need not ask explicitly.
I need not ask explicitly.
The all of God is lost to the quest of lesser goals of any kind, and prayer becomes requests for enemies.
The goal of perfect love is lost in the quest for lesser goals of any kind, and then prayer becomes requests for enemies.
The power of prayer can be quite clearly recognized even in this.
The power of prayer can be quite clearly recognized even in this.
No one who wants an enemy will fail to find one.
No one who wants an enemy will fail to find one.
But just as surely will he lose the only true goal that is given him.
Just as surely I will lose the only true goal that is given to me.
Think of the cost and understand it well.
I must contemplate this cost and understand it well.
All other goals are at the cost of God.
The truth is that I pursue all other goals at the expense of perfect love. And from the top, it is not easy for me to realize that prayers for things, status, human love, and external gifts of any kind are always made to set up jailers and to hide from guilt. These things are used for goals that's a substitute for pure formless awareness of perfect love, and therefore distort the purpose of prayer. The desire for them is the prayer. I need not ask explicitly. The goal of perfect love is lost in the quest for lesser goals of any kind, and then prayer becomes requests for enemies. The power of prayer can be quite clearly recognized even in this. No one who wants an enemy will fail to find one. But just as surely I will lose the only true goal that is given to me. I must contemplate this cost and understand it well. All other goals are at the expense of perfect love. So it's not easy. Yeah, it's not easy for us to realize that prayers are usually done for human love and external gifts. But this is just setting ourselves up for jailers and to hide from guilt. And these are just a way to substitute us away from the pure formless awareness, and so distort the purpose of the prayer that it, the way it should be. So we need to ask explicitly, and so we end up going for the lesser goals instead of the perfect love. And this is why we request enemies. So
Yeah.
So if you want an enemy, then there's no worry, you will find one.
So if I choose lesser goals, so let's say I say, well, I want status, I want money, I want a special relationship. That's also bound up in that is a request for an enemy. Even though it's not overtly, you might say, well, I want love, I want a special relationship.
Yeah.
Actually, underneath that is the request for an enemy. Usually what will happen is that special partner will become enemy number one, because they will be the one who really annoys you, and then you're going to project guilt onto them. And so really what you're asking for is a request, you're asking for an enemy to perpetuate the separate self, although the ego says you're asking for love. But that's illusory. So he's saying just, wake up and be aware of the cost of this whole thought system. If you choose the ego, you're choosing enemies, you're choosing a thought system of hatred and fear and attack, judgment and condemnation and guilt and sin. Realize what you're choosing. And if you really realize what the cost is, you won't do it anymore, will you? That's why, like yesterday, Len, we were talking about, he really lays it on quite thick in the paragraph, in the insert on what is the ego. And he's going into some graphic detail. Blood shall flow before the altar, where its sickly follows prepare to die. And this is pretty graphic language. But he's doing that because he's got to make us aware of the cost. And we really understand what the cost is, of the ego, we will stop wanting to believe in it. When you see the full cost of it, there's no way in your right mind you could then choose it. So he has to show us that and convince us of that, despite our resistance to that truth. And that's a big part of the awakening process. Okay, so I'm understanding now what the ego is, what it does, and what the cost of believing in it is. Cost belief in it entails, as he said yesterday in the insert. And then I'm willing to let all that go because I know that I don't want those costs. You know, I'm choosing to love instead. Okay.
Jono,
Yeah.
and I know it's going to be counting this for the same bracket, but I think what makes it more difficult, like let's say as a parent or mother, praying for their child, and they're coming with the, unconditionally love intention, we I'm just
Praying for their
I
child,
don't
you
know
mean?
how that's making their child an enemy of you.
So if you pray for lesser goals, then really what you're praying for is the preservation of form. So let's say someone's child is sick, that parent is desperately praying for the child to become well again, because they're attached, right? They're especially attached to the child, and they don't want to lose the child. So all of that perpetuates a separate self. And a separate self, as part of its thought system, requires enemies. So that enemy might not be the child, that might be the special love, but special love also invites special hate. And just the flip side of the coin. So, well, the child might be, when it grows up, then they might end up, having a fallout with the child. That's possible, or with someone else. And they're not connecting the dots and going, well, my prayer for saving my child's life, the body of the child, directly it connects me. It connects me with my separate self, and it then invites all the other ego madness. So effectively, then I'm asking for enemies. I'm asking for sin and guilt and fear and attack and victimhood and pain and suffering and sickness and death. I'm asking for all of it. If I ask for any of the ego, then I'm praying for all of it. And Yeshua's trying to make us aware of that. So look, it's a thought system. So you believe in one aspect of it, then you have to believe in all of it. So you pray for the preservation of the body of your child because you're scared to lose them. You don't want to lose your child. Now that would seem to be a very normal, natural human response. You're making this entire thought system of separation real. You're making your separate self real, which perpetuates guilt, which means you're going to have enemies, which means you're going to project your guilt onto those enemies. And then that becomes the prayer, bound up in apparently praying for something good to happen. So it's a very much a low form of prayer. It makes the whole thought system of the ego real. Do you understand?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there, but I'm thinking of situations where people and there's been group prayers, and people, they might be praying for someone to get better and they have, or I think you've used the example of that meditation for peace. I mean, I don't know, maybe the words are different, but somehow these things have worked as well.
Well, so what are you praying for is the question, right? So if it worked, then it's probably coming from, almost certainly from the Holy Spirit. It's coming from pure formless awareness of perfect love. So the true prayer connects you with your source and asks for this divine awareness, grace, presence, to enter in. It invites it into the situation, into the minds of the people involved as a way out of the mess, the way out of guilt and sin, and fear and attack and whatever else is going wrong. But it should never be a prayer for a specific outcome. It's the prayer for love, to return to the situations, prayer for forgiveness, help me to let go of my misperceptions of the situation so that my mind and the minds of others can be healed. And that's the much higher form of prayer than praying for a specific outcome. If you're just praying for the body of your child to be healed, that's not really going to help you or the child. Now, to the ego, that's blasphemy. The ego will say, well, that's really not true. It's callous. It's unloving. It's unkind. And so on, because it's got to defend its thought system, which is based on illusion. Okay, so the ego says the body is primary, and saving this very special body of this person who now is attached to your child is incredibly important. But what that does is makes the individual self very important, doesn't it? It makes you very important. Who would you be without your child? That's what people fear. It becomes part of their identity. And so when they lose a child or someone close to them, then they lose a part of themselves because they're attached to that person, and then they suffer. Unless they awaken, and then they don't suffer because they realize that the child and any separate self, any separate body here doesn't really exist. They were an illusion. They pop in and out of existence as all illusions do. And that one just didn't last very long. So your child maybe came for 5-10 years and then died. And, so that illusion of a separate self didn't last very long. Others go on until they're 80 or 90. But what's the difference? Everyone dies in the end. So from that perspective, does it really matter if they died when they were, 5 or 10 or 90? No, not really, ultimately, in truth. But from the separate self's perspective, it matters a lot, because when you say, well, I don't have my child, and now I've got to live the rest of my life without my child, and who will I be without my child? And I'm so sad. And why did this happen to me? And why, et cetera, et cetera. And that just perpetuates the story of an individual self that's now in grief and suffering. Or you could just say, well, the child never really existed as any kind of separate self. So their personality, the form, identity, the body, none of that was true. So why am I mourning an illusion? Why am I grief-stricken over the passing of an illusion that was never real? Again, that, like, a lot of parents will say, well, that's just callous and cold and calculating. Of course you love your child. Of course you're going to be devastated when your child is your child dies. But it doesn't have to be that way. Yeshua's teaching us all sin and guilt and grief and pain is not necessary if you really understand. The child never really existed. The mind that is really the child, the Christ mind, isn't affected at all by the dream identity the child had, and so they've gone and they're not suffering anymore. They might well come back and have another incarnation, which then is their journey. But who are you to say that they should have stayed longer? No one can say. That was obviously their choice, their karma, their journey. So who are you to say they should have stayed longer? Only a separate self would say that, would insist on that. So yeah, those are just some illustrations of the point. If genuine healings happened, and generally people in prayer have gone here, and they've connected with something beyond the ego, and they brought that in. So the Holy Spirit comes in and starts reinterpreting the dream. And if people do that as a collective, it can be very powerful. And then the prayer would have to transcend just, oh, I don't want to lose. I'm so scared of losing my child. It's more about asking for presence, for grace, for pure formless awareness to come into the situation and work a miracle, whatever that looks like, whatever's for the highest good. Or if the child dies, then so be it. That was obviously what the child needed to experience and learn. But yeah, that's going to require a lot of mind training too. to stay in that. Yeah, because the ego is very powerful when it comes to special relationships, and we get very attached to these special relationships and the dream, and the tendency then is to believe the dream and the story and the story of yourself and the grief. And I have a son myself, and well, if he died tomorrow, would I be as non-attached as I am now? Quite possibly not. I'd probably have to work through some grief. But then that would be my lesson. That would be a great, forgiveness opportunity, a great letting go lesson, which if I really learned it, could free my mind entirely from the dream. So all good, really, if you look at it from that perspective. Okay, so let's have a look at the summary. Let's read that quickly. Won't dwell too much on it. So why don't you each read a paragraph and then just quickly summarize it, and then we'll go on to switch it to the next paragraph.
Okay. Prayer is always for myself. Praying for others, incorrectly understood, is about releasing my own projections of guilt onto my companions, which will help me to perceive that it is not really them who are harming me, but myself. My initial prayers, which are often tainted with envy and malice, misguided calls for vengeance, that don't come from true understanding, but from a belief in separation and the guilt and fear this entails. So when you're praying for others, but it's actually for myself. And it's if I'm praying correctly, then I'm releasing the projections and releasing my guilt and my perception of others who I think are harming me are not really, but it's
Right.
instead of calling forward vengeance as part of a prayer, it's a letting go instead, and it's a letting go. And it's because it's a letting go of belief in separation and with the letting go of guilt.
Yeah. When I release my projection of guilt, I'm undoing the guilt, aren't I? If I'm projecting guilt by attacking, blaming them, if I let that go, then I'm also doing the guilt, and I'm also undoing the separate self that believes that it's guilty, which is why it's so powerful. In the face of the temptation to judge and condemn, project all your guilt, to not do that and withdraw that, and instead say, okay, I'm going to let this go, because then you're undoing your sense of guilt and your own separate self. So your enemy gives you the opportunity, apparent enemy gives you the opportunity to do that. Which is why it's so powerful. And how would you do it if you didn't have the projections going on? How would you be aware of the guilt if you didn't have the projection of guilt onto an apparent enemy? You wouldn't. It would be hidden, be buried in your subconscious. You wouldn't be aware of it. So the enemy is there to allow you to become aware of what's hidden in your subconscious. And everything that you feel towards your enemy, the anger, the hatred, the attack, condemnation, judgment, vengeance, and so on, that's all in your own mind. That's what you need to let go of. And your enemy is just aware of that. Which is why, turn the other cheek and do unto others as you have them do unto you. These teachings are powerful, and they work because they undo your separate self and they free your mind back into its source. All right, so number 2, Elaine, if you can read that one. The true purpose of prayer.
The true purpose of prayer is lost to me when I pray for material things, worldly status, or special relationships, as these are just ways to hide from my guilt and set up mental jailers. These prayers are a distraction from my one true goal. union with pure formless awareness of perfect love. It's just saying that when we're praying and we pray for material things and special relationships, then it's just a way of hiding from the guilt that set up a mental jailer. So these prayers are actually a distraction from our true goal, which is with the union of pure formless awareness of perfect love.
Yeah. And the ego is very good at creating these distractions. It's invented a whole world of illusions, which we then attach to, and we pray for those. And our prayer is, well, whenever I desire something, that's the prayer. I pray for that, for material things, for worldly status or special relationships, rather than for truth. If you look at, let's go to here quickly, because it's quite well illustrated in this diagram. So you see at the very core of this is David Hoffmeister's diagram. It goes with the instrument for peace. At the very core of the ego of your mind is the desire or prayer. So desire would be of the ego. I'm desiring some special thing to happen, which I think is going to help me. And the prayer is, well, the true prayer is, let me let go of these false desires and all of my illusions and just find the truth. And so at the very core of your mind, there's going to be that going on. The desire, which means that you still believe in the ego and you believe the ego can help you and you desire what the ego tells you to desire, or you pray to be released from all of that and freed from that, which is then the Holy Spirit saying, just let it all go and collapse all of this. The belief, the thought, the emotion, and the perception all are based on the desire or prayer of the heart. So if you undo that desire and you pray only to let go, then the entire construct collapses. The belief and the thought and the emotion and the perceptions that rest on the thoughts and the beliefs and the emotions just collapse. And when that happens, you become clear and clean, and this prayer of the heart just shines through. These are no longer dense layers. You just become, empty, open, spacious awareness, which is transparent, which is clear, which is the light. Hence, we use the word light. Okay. So number 3, should we move on? I now recognize that I must let go of my belief in separation. Kim?
I now recognize that I must let go of my belief in separation. This is not without pain, as fear often makes me retreat and project my guilt onto others, causing me to perceive them as enemies rather than as myself. But understanding that my belief in separation and guilt for this belief is gone, I can truly free myself. So I recognize that what I need to do is to let it go. And I acknowledge that there is going to be pain with this process. Fear that comes with it means that when I go into fear, I'm entrapping myself because I'm still projecting the fear onto others, the guilt onto others, meaning I'm my own prisoner. So to be able to free myself, I have to actually go through that discomfort or pain. The realization that I can restore to my true self with the letting go. Else I persist this belief in separation. So if I let go, that the belief in separation will be gone, and then I can be truly free.
Yeah, exactly. When I forgive my worst enemy, I've forgiven myself and I've let go of my separate self. That's what forgiving yourself really means. You've let go of your separate self. And you've restored your mind to its true awareness. So when you forgive others, you're really just letting go of your separate self and freeing your own mind. But that takes a lot of learning, doesn't it? It's very easy to get sucked into the ego's game. I recently had a situation where I was being, roundly attacked and condemned and abused and all this stuff via email mainly. And it was very tempting to go into the ego story, perceive that person or those people as an enemy, as enemies. But this practice is saying, well, no, they're just bringing up what's already in me, and they're giving me an opportunity to let it go. So I should welcome that. And with some difficulty, I've done that, and forgiveness is done. There's peace. I don't perceive them as enemies anymore, and that's the lesson. You kind of got to have the experience of having the enemy, and often they do things that are not nice, to understand this, which is why it says this process will not be without pain.
Sure.
I often make a retreat and project my guilt onto others, causing me to perceive them as enemies rather than as myself. So, even though I've done all this mind training, there's still this great temptation when someone's behaving in this way to go, okay, well, they, clearly out to get me. I mean, they're stating as such. But that's the illusion, isn't it? And the ego is just amping it up and saying, okay, well, let's make that illusion really convincing to try and get you to believe in it, rather than hold to the truth and just let it go. No matter what they say or do, they are still the Christ. They are still one with you. They are still your true self, no matter what they say or do. That's the lesson. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. So they might be trying to crucify you, but they really don't understand anything if they're trying to do that, because they're crucifying themselves. Okay, so number 4 then. And I'll see that my enemy is not a jailer. It's Elaine, I think, if you can read that.
I now see that my enemy is not a jailer, but a messenger of my true self and an extension of perfect love. This realization is a blessing to me, lifting my heart and releasing my fears. I understand that holding on to these fears only keeps me imprisoned. In letting go, I perceive the true value in freeing others and therefore myself, as we are all the same in the reality of perfect loving awareness. The truth is that I pursue all other goals at the expense of perfect love. So it's saying at this stage we now understand the enemy is not our jailer, but a messenger from our true self. And it's a blessing, and it'll release us from all fears. And so we understand now that holding on to these fears only keeps us imprisoned. So we need to let go to perceive the true value in freeing others, and then therefore it'll free us. As we're all the same in reality. We are this perfect loving awareness. So why pursue all these goals at the expense of this perfect love?
Yeah, and it's starting to realize that any other goal is always at the expense of perfect love. It's a substitute for perfect love. So, don't pursue these goals. Now, people say, well, what about finances? I need some money. I've got a career. I've got a family. I might have some interests. But make that all subservient to the one goal.
Secondary.
Awakening. You say, well, whatever it takes to awaken, and you direct me. If something is a special function through which I can learn awakening, then great, I'll pursue that. But if it's not, then it's going to drop away. Then the other goals that are really just a distraction start to become meaningless to you in the face of the one goal of awakening. and you start letting them go, and then you start making different choices and spending time on things that really matter rather than pursuing all kinds of arbitrary goals at the expense of perfect love. And that's the process of awakening, which is what we're all on. And it's a process of gradually learning more discipline, saying, okay, I'm going to stick to the truth, and I'm going to be focused on that, and single-minded, one direction of truth, and everything must serve that truth. So if I'm doing anything in this world, it must be in service of that truth. However that looks for me, that might be writing a book for one person, maybe teaching for another, maybe becoming a volunteer in a charity for another, maybe just being really kind and caring and helpful to, in your case, and then you have someone who needs your care. It just depends. Everyone's situation is unique, so everyone's going to have a special function to learn this. But that's there for everyone. If you ask for it, it will be revealed to you. What's your way out of the dream to make this perfect love, perfect loving awareness your one goal? And if that's your true prayer, go back to the idea of prayer. Well, show me then, show me the way, show me how to awaken. Adyashanti, so I'll give you an example of that. Adyashanti is a well-known spiritual teacher. At the age of 25, prayed, and he said, okay, whatever it takes, enlightenment is my only goal. This is all I want in my life. Whatever it takes, you show me. Bring me whatever I need to learn, whatever I need to experience to awaken. And, it was a very sincere prayer. And then he said it just kicked off a process of 7 years of immense difficulty. He went through some really, really difficult, tough experiences. I don't know what they were. I don't know his story. He didn't talk about them in any more detail. But, he prayed for awakening, and it was like, okay, then you've got to go through the darkness. You've got to go through the dark night of the soul, and your darkness has to be revealed and let go of. So then there we go. It's, you've got to have these experiences to facilitate that. As I say, be careful what you pray for. If you say, well, whatever it takes to awaken, well, then all your stuff's got to come up. But that's what you want. If you're going to awaken, it has to come up, and you have to, let it go. Okay, so then just the key message to summarize it all. And that can probably wrap it up for tonight. So, Kim, I think if you can read that for us.
True prayer is always for myself. It helps me free myself from guilt and the belief in separation that underlies guilt, and recognize others as extensions of perfect love. By letting go of my fear and hatred of my seeming enemies, I accept the unity and find freedom and a deeper connection with my former enemies and my true self. I also realize that I pursue all other goals at the expense of perfect love.
Okay, so any thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah, so if we're praying truly, even if we involve others, it's about it's the forgiveness and letting go of our guilt and the projection of that guilt onto others where we perceive they are enemies. So with the letting go, that drops, the belief in separation drops, and we reveal our true selves, and realize that our enemies are actually our companions. So they were there to help us let go.
Yeah.
And pursue many goals.
If you realize this, it sets you free, doesn't it? It totally sets you free from needing to have enemies. Okay, well, there are no enemies. They're all my brothers. And, these particular brothers who seem to be my enemies are just showing me my own separate self, and they're showing me what I need to let go of, which I need to be grateful for, rather than, fostering this and keeping them as my enemies and hating them, which means I'm very much identified with my separate self. They're giving me an opportunity to free myself and release myself. And when you understand this, then, the kind of unconditional love and kindness, turning the other cheek, as Yeshua put it, that becomes automatic. You're going to do that, aren't you? Because it makes sense to you.
Yeah.
So it's understanding leads to that kind of enlightened behavior. Without it, forget it. You're not going to be able to do that if you don't understand this. You're going to be in a grievance. Oh, this enemy's done this to me, and they've really hurt me, and you stay in that victimhood state and the grievance, and then there's thoughts of defense and attack, and you want to project your guilt onto them because they're the guilty ones and they're so bad, and they've done this to you, and you're the victim, and you're suffering, and how dare they, and why did they do this to you, and on it goes, and then you miss the point. You miss the point of the exercise. They were there to help you free yourself from that separate self rather than perpetuate it. So it's not an easy lesson to learn, is it? But if you can learn it, then that's a ticket to freedom. You learn this one lesson, you're free. Because you can then let go of, the worst the ego throws at you, a seeming enemy who's, done terrible things to you. This is a primary invitation for projection of guilt. Well, if you let that go and you see through the illusion, then what does the ego have left in its bag of tricks? It can no longer fool you into projecting guilt onto anyone. If you don't project guilt, then the guilt is going to be undone. If there's no guilt, then there's no separate self. Go back to the diagram, and you just roll this whole ego illusion up like a carpet. See how it works. If you refuse to blame and attack and project your guilt, then you're really denying the sin and the guilt that are responsible for that. And if there's no sin and guilt, then you can't be an individual self, just separate identity named, because you never did separate. So the idea of separation and the whole ego construct isn't real. And so you unravel it all, and you end up back in pure formless awareness of perfect love. And that logic, the Holy Spirit's logic will lead you back there, as inevitably as the ego's logic will lead you down the ladder into victimhood and suffering. Those are the choices. Which interpretation you make of situations is going to determine whether you're climbing up the ladder to free yourself or you're going down the ladder to enslave yourself. So really, this is a very profound section. If you applied this lesson, you would become an awakened being and join, the masters like Yeshua, who had, he's been crucified. So people have really projected their guilt heavily onto him. They're killing his body in the most gruesome way, and he's able to say, well, forgive them, Father, for they don't know what they do. They're just caught up in the illusion of the dream and the false self. But I understand from the Holy Spirit's perspective that none of this is true. So forgive them because they don't really know what they're doing. They're confused in the face of that enormous attack. And that really is the key message of Christianity. It's forgiveness in the face of the worst possible form of attack, which Yeshua demonstrated in the crucifixion. And then the resurrection was just, well, you can transcend this dream of projection of guilt and the accusation and the blame and the attack and the death. You can transcend that, and you can resurrect your mind into pure formless awareness of perfect love, which is eternal. And then, he resurrected his body as just a demonstration of that fact, that pure formless awareness of perfect love did not die because of the crucifixion. It was still there, and he could claim that power, and through that come back into a body temporarily to demonstrate that. So we're talking about here about the essence of the Christian teaching, but most Christians have lost that. They don't understand what the crucifixion really means. and they don't follow Yeshua's example. So you ask yourself, well, if Yeshua could forgive those who had done this horrendous, I mean, it's about as bad as it gets, right? In this world, they're gonna seize you, they're gonna beat you, flog you, nail you to a cross, so you drown in your own body fluids over hours in the most painful way possible in a public spectacle, so everyone can see your utter humiliation. Doesn't really get worse than that. If he can forgive that, then maybe you could forgive someone who's just made a nasty comment on social media, or said something in person to you, or maybe they've tried actively to harm you, or someone you love. Surely you can forgive that, given his demonstration of that kind of ultimate forgiveness. And that's really what true Christianity is about. Okay, so any other thoughts or comments or questions on this one?
I know it's very, very helpful.
Yeah, I think it ties up nicely. I'm glad you see why the supplements are necessary, because in the text itself, he doesn't go into this level of detail. He just, this one paragraph, which we looked at. Where is it now? There we go. One paragraph on prayer as forgiveness, but it's very short. It's half of that paragraph. It's 4 or 5 sentences. So he expands on these ideas in the supplement, and so we can really understand what prayer is and how we can use it, construct for our release.
Yeah.
And if you applied the teaching in just this one section, it would be life-changing, game-changing. You wouldn't have no more enemies, and you would be freeing your mind of guilt, which then collapses the ego. So any one of these sections, if you really apply them, is a ticket to freedom. You could escape just by applying this lesson without exceptions, refusing to have any enemies. That would probably do the trick of collapsing your ego and freeing your mind. So just be very aware that the ego's tendency to create enemies, and it can do that not just with people, but it can do that out of things in the world. So the weather could be your enemy. Oh, the weather's not good today, and I'm feeling down because of it. You've made the weather your enemy, haven't you? You've got a grievance against the weather.
Yeah.
So we do that all the time in subtle ways. And then, okay, the next day the weather changes, so you don't hold the grievance, but again, the weather's not good, and you'll come back to that. So you haven't really let it go there. They're quite good at that in the UK, I've noticed. Oh, the weather's it's all cold and it's wet and rainy, and it's like, well, let it go. It doesn't really matter. And then tomorrow it changes, and you can appreciate that. But if the weather's bad, don't make the weather an enemy, because it's just more of the same. Setting up something outside of yourself to project your guilt onto. Just be aware of that tendency, because it's a very strong tendency in the ego to do that. So whenever you notice yourself doing that, and it usually shows up as, well, I'm judging someone else or something else, I'm attacking them, I'm feeling separate from them. Oh, hang on, the alarm bells go off. Stop, because you're projecting your guilt, you're reinforcing your guilt, you're condemning yourself to hell. You're attacking yourself and condemning yourself to victimhood and suffering right here, right now, in this moment, whenever you think that thought. Stop. Don't do it. Let it go. And that's awakening. I mean, if you can do that, then in that moment, you're choosing awakening over enslavement and misery. All right. So good, really good lesson. I'm glad we did that. We've done a lot of the lessons, so I thought we'd do the text tonight. Well, not technically the text, but you know what I mean. It's similar to the text. It's a supplement.
Yeah, it's good.
And I'd really recommend you read the preceding ones. So I post those every day. Ideas, read them every day, so then you keep pace and you know where we're at, because he's preceded this with the ladder of prayer, and the first one was true prayer. So read those. They posted in the group.
Really.
Okay, so shall we leave it there? And we'll Well, I'll see you tomorrow, Elaine. Are you going to join? I need to do an afternoon session tomorrow, so can we do afternoon from say 1:30?
Well, I've got some work, but it could be more nearer 2. So yeah,
No, that's fine. We'll make it
2 would be better, yeah, because
make it 2 o'clock. I've got a call at 4:15, so I've got
yeah, that's fine. Yeah, no, that's fine.
4 hours. Okay.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
All right.
Okie doke. Bye, Kim.
Yeah. Thanks for joining.
Right.
All right. Cheers, Kim.
Bye.
Nice for
Bye.
joining. Hopefully see you soon, and have a good evening and weekend. If I don't see you, Kim, tomorrow, probably you're going to be working. So see you next week sometime.
Okay, thank you. Good
Bye.
night. Namaste.
Namaste.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, so that is a wrap for today. If you follow the live stream, you enjoyed the session, then by all means subscribe to the channel to be notified whenever we go live, which is 3 or 4 times a week. And also catch the recordings on YouTube. And go to lifebuild.com if you'd like to take a deeper dive, find out more about the program, and receive a lot of free content. So I send out a daily inspirational quote. I send out a lesson, some comments on the quote that leads to the lesson, some text, or now we're in the Song of Prayer in the original and alternative versions of that, which you saw in the alternative language, which kind of makes it easier to understand. And you'll get invitations to join these live sessions in Zoom with the Zoom link. So all of that is freely available at lifebuild.com. And sign up. Just you need a mobile number. That's download Telegram on your mobile, and then I can add you to the Telegram group. So hope to catch you on the inside of the group or one of these sessions soon. And wishing you much love, peace, and joy in the meantime. Namaste. Which means the true prayerful, healed self in me acknowledges and honors that same true prayerful and healed self in you, Christ in you.